Naturally, what happens with the water supply impacts all of us. Climate scientists have been warning for years to prepare for something called aridification, as you just heard, out in the West, which basically means a region becoming drier over time. As the atmosphere warms, it pulls moisture from the land and water, which of course means the soil dries out. But you see, the difference is rather than experiencing a temporary drought, this is something permanent. All of this in a region that's already dealing with sweeping fires, record-breaking heat, and historic drought. So to help us see the big picture here, we're going to bring in Shweta Chakraborty. Thanks for joining us. Now, this all sounds pretty bleak when you hear about it, but for the future. But is there anything we can be doing or should be doing right now to prevent those worst-case scenarios?
Yeah, I like that. Let's kick this off on a positive note. Actually, despite population increasing in this part of the United States, water usage actually has gone down, which goes to show that we can tweak behaviors. And that is one of the most cost-effective ways in which we can really preserve the limited water that we do have. Of course, there's technology that has been investigated in recent years because this isn't a unique feature that the west of the United States is experiencing. But obviously in arid parts of the world, like the Middle East, desalination is being understood better in ways that we can scale the technology and really use it at mass globally. So there are other options, but they're still really expensive and they haven't reached commercial viability yet. So it's really important that we do everything we can as individuals to conserve as much water as possible. So the reservoir levels, those water levels in the reservoirs that Colorado River feeds into, stay at a minimal so water can still be pumped out. That would be the worst case scenario for California and the West, to see these levels drop so low that we can't even pump water from the actual reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell.
Now, just a few moments ago, we touched briefly on equality in climate solutions, specifically the impacts of climate change on minority communities. So, how can we work, all of us, toward evening the playing field for everyone?
Right. And you mentioned water rights. This really does come down to understanding that this is a shared resource and who has the right to access this shared resource based on historical racism that the United States has conducted, unfortunately, in allowing these different rights to be received by certain groups over others. So we can correct for historic wrongs, and we can ensure that those who have been restricted and disenfranchised, like indigenous groups, from access to water, get the water that they deserve. And a lot of the water used in this part of the United States is for food and agriculture. And so we can buy water rights from those who are using it for raising livestock, for example. And that might increase maybe the price of beef in the grocery stores. But that's the kind of trade-off that we have to contend with as Americans that are all requiring the use of water, not just for drinking, but also for things like for animals that we consume. And so if we can figure out better and more fair ways to share access to water and water rights, then we can begin to correct these historic wrongs that we unfortunately have to contend with in our country.
Sure. So for the average consumer across the country who perhaps doesn't live in this affected area, the price of beef groceries, that could be a concern. But, if we don't do something about this, could we be looking at, the loss of entire swaths of land or the loss of entire industries if this continues to go on?
We have the benefit of having unprecedented foresight as to what's coming. So that's the positive in this, right? We know we have to adapt to this. We're entering a mega drought. We know that climate change is messing up the jet stream. So the likelihood of the rains coming and actually refilling these reservoirs at any level that is going to bring it back to what we consider normal levels, the likelihood of that is low. So we can prepare and adapt proactively for what we know is going to be extended periods of drought. So again, that means behavioral tweaks, turning the faucet off when you're brushing your teeth, demanding less of these animal products that are really energy and water intensive, not watering your lawns, maybe appreciating natural landscapes that do look like they're dry, but ultimately that is the reality of the landscapes that some of these places are facing now. We're not going to have green, lush lawns in these landscapes, and we don't need to create artificial environments that are doing even more detriment to our shared experience in this part of the country. And so things like that we can demand as citizens, of not just the West that's really experiencing this in real time, but collectively as the United States.
Yeah, certainly things we can all do in our own homes and in our own lives. Shweta Chakraborty, thank you for joining us. We'll be right back.